Welcome to the section of my channel where I present you budget decks. The decks will be playable, somewhat competitive, but don't expect to top any event with them. In this format, the decks will not cost more than 50 to 80 bucks, and I'll really try to stick to it. And today with the Vampire Shaddoll deck, I have made a vampire. I wanted to really make a vampire deck, but I wanted to be a little bit different from other vampire decks. Plus, I kind of wanted to make it more consistent since I'm like presenting some budgety decks here and decks for like tier 3 whatever kind of decks that you can enjoy it, you can actually make some plays with it, but you'll probably not play through like a 5 negation board. Where we come to the actual first problem of this deck, it's a kind of a go second deck, but the problem is you don't have enough room for disruptions. So if your opponent plays like pendulums that put up 4, 5, 6 interruptions first, if you're playing against Truth Gaming basically, then you're gonna have a bad time. Other than that, you can play around like 1 or 2 negates sometimes. Like most of the time you should be fine, but I had in mind to make a deck that's somewhat consistent, that you can actually get a good graveyard set up, and you'll see what I mean when I'm talking about my card choices. To the price of the deck, there are some expensive cards, like the Shaddoll engine is somewhat between like 15 to 20 bucks, maybe less, like maybe more, depends on where you get it, I think, because like the cards are somewhat old, so you have to see what you get with that. The vampires at all don't cost that much. I think the most important or most expensive one is Vampire Fräulein, and she is, I think, what, $2 max per card. Shiranui cards and Unizombie add up. Like, if I would say if the main deck how it is right now, you'd probably spend about 40 to 60 bucks, depending on what you get. If you look into the extra deck, like I've already counted like those 3 cards for the Shaddoll engine. You can run one Shekinaga, it costs a little bit more. If you want to, you can invest into this, because that gets your Bazooka into the graveyard as well, so you don't really have to rely on Unizombie, because mainly with Unizombie you kind of want to get the vampires into the graveyard just so you can get your searches and special summons off. And another very expensive card in the deck is like the Synchros, and everything doesn't really cost much. If you want to run Nightmares and stuff, it's okay. Linkaribo I would advise to have, because it's kind of a good play if you have the Familiar in hand and you don't have any way of getting him into the graveyard. Then you can always normal summon him and Linkaribo it. Not the best play, but at least a play, so I kind of like the card in the deck. But the expensive card at the moment is Vampire Sucker. I think at least 10 bucks the card, and that can bump up the price to like the maximum limit I wanted to go with. So you really have to watch. If you already have the card or if you like it, then that's pretty good. I think the card is really strong in zombies, and also it helps you with the restriction of like Shenru's, like the Ghost Meals Girl story thing, because you have a restriction to only specials on zombie monsters. Then that's why I only run the card at 2 basically, because then Apprentice or Landfilling just don't work as good. But that being said about the prices, let's start into the duel, into the deck profile. Wow. I run one Vampire Vamp, not because the card is like especially very good, but I really like the card being able to steal your opponent's important monster, maybe link it away, get like new link fodder and so on. I really think the card at 1, since it's so searchable, is kind of neat, and you barely brick with it, and you can always get into the graveyard and so on. So I think the card itself works pretty well, where you can always like switch her out, put another Mizuki into the deck, get rid of Vampire Sorcerer as well if you don't want him, I guess. Kind of looks different, but I think it should be Sorceress, but whatever. So if you don't want the card, then that's fine. But I actually felt like whenever I could use it, it always had place, and you barely like dead draw it, and it's worth it. Plus, you still have a Lure of Darkness, so if you really don't want the card, you can still banish it for that sense. One other card is Vampire Red Baron. The card is not played as much, but I really came to like the effect, since also the card is searchable, because every vampire monster is searchable. And a lot of the time, this effect comes in more handy than the Scarlet ones, because you can actually swip for a monster of your opponent that's really good, because they can actually build up good boards. Since you want to go second, then you can give them like a card that is kind of worthless, and you steal their monster, which can be quite neat, since you can actually choose which one, which is pretty good, but you have to target it, so that makes it kind of less good. I run double Scarlet because it's sometimes helpful if you draw into it, since it's searchable. I didn't feel like needing 3 times. You can bump it up if you want to, but for me it was important to have one Crimson to the deck as well, because the protection can be super neat. You don't have to run him, you could go for triple Scarlet, but I felt like the protection is somewhat neat, and since you can fill up your graveyard a lot, special summon a lot of monsters with Scarlet, you have to watch your life points sometimes, but I thought that's kind of good. For the vampire, like the Shaddoll engine, I run double beast because you can get into the graveyard with Uni-Zombie, so you can get cards off of the, like, draws off of that. And I think 3 Shaddoll monsters with triple Shadow Fusion are enough. You can play 4 if you want to, but if you break and if you start with like 3 triple Shaddoll monsters in your hand or whatever, double, then that's already kind of not a good hand in that sense. Obviously triple Fraulein, because it's basically you're out to a lot of cards that you otherwise can't target or can't destroy, and helps you finish the game OTK sometimes, so that is a quite neat card. Plus it's another special summon, so the card is very strong. Shaddoll Dragon, at the moment I would usually play a different Shaddoll monster, but Dragon actually is kind of good against, I mean, Alter Guys, Sky Striker maybe, and so on. Having that Disruption Salamangreat works as well. So this is kind of neat. Plus, you don't have that much spell trap card removal, so the card is kind of important. Being able to send it to the graveyard with stuff like Foolish Burial as well can be quite neat. I want 1 Mizuki. The thing is with Unism, usually you want to go into like Psyframe Omega, but you see, I don't run Omega in the deck. You can run him if you have the money for it, or you have Omega, then do it. But I did not. When I was thinking of the deck profile, you can basically search out one of the Shiranui cards if you want to, and so on. But I didn't want to go into Omega because it's not really a zombie card. I know every zombie deck is kind of relying on him, but in Vampires it does not make that much of a difference. Sure, recycling Mizuki can be quite neat, and looping a card out of your opponent's hand is quite neat as well. But I feel like you don't have to do it, and yeah, you know the drill. Like, if you want to do it, then obviously do it. I won't stop you from doing that. On Sorcerer, because being able to summon cards like Red Baron, Scarlet, or even Vampire Vamp without a tribute can be quite nice, especially since you can normal summon twice, so you can actually build up your board. This is a card if you already have your graveyard set up, and you still need your card, can still use Unizombie's effect, Shaddoll Fusion's effect, have her in the hand to discard a Shiranui Story Saga, and so on, then being able to banish her for this kind of effect is actually quite neat, because you don't lose the advantage then tributing monsters, and you can actually link a lot, because every monster on the field these days matters, and you can use them for link material. So I actually like the effect. 1 Shiranui Spirit Master, if you banish it with Swallow Star, like the Shiranui style Swallow Slash, for example, you can pop another card in the field, so it's a good disruption. If you start with him and Solitaire, you have instantly 2 monsters on the field, which is quite neat, and so on. Like, the card isn't bad, you don't have to run it, but I like it at 1 in the deck. Solitaire, basically just there to search Unizombie. Technically, you could go with Unizombie, Solitaire combo, and Mizuki into Psyframe Omega, but I don't do that. But you can obviously do this. Unizombie, one of the big playmakers, can send mainly your Retainer and your Familiar into the graveyard, because you kind of want them in the graveyard. The reason why I ran that many weird vampire monsters is because I kind of wanted to bump up the counter of vampire cards in the deck, because if you have them in your graveyard and you want to special summon them out, you have to discard a card or send one from the field to the graveyard. If you don't have a vampire card in your starting hand, then this effect can be quite hard to trigger, because you don't have anything to send to the graveyard. So that's why I run a lot of vampire cards in a sense, but it usually pays off. Like, it usually totally pays off. Brute Search is mainly your domain or your domination, depends on what you want. If you have a good setup, then you don't need domain. If you don't have a good enough setup, then go for domain instead of the domination. And with Familiar, you will either search Fraulein, Scarlet, or Red Baron, depending on what you're doing. You can search Vamp if you have the right setup for it. And that is basically this card. Double Lure of Darkness, because you have a lot of darkness monsters. You don't need every monster in the hand. That's a good way of getting rid of your Shaddoll cards as well, and like turning them actually into real combos. Another card is 1 for 1, so you can get out the Surge with Familiar and get more monsters into your graveyard, because that's kind of important. Shaddoll Fusion really helps you with the going second. Your opponent cannot, you have to watch, because you special summon a lot too, so you have to kind of watch, and that's when Red Baron comes in, because he is not sitting on the special summon that much like Scarlet does, but he actually does other stuff than special summon monsters, because if you go for Winda, then you can only special summon 1 more time, so you kind of want to see when you're doing it. Obviously, you can link her away anytime if you don't want her, or if you just want to get cards into the graveyard, because you can send 1 darkness monster from your deck to the graveyard and get a search with Beast or pop a Spell Trap. So I really like Shaddoll Fusion. I run Double Desire, basically filling up your graveyard or being able to special summon monsters out of your graveyard can both be neat. Foolish Burial, I don't think in a zombie deck I have to say much to this card. Shiranui Story Saga kind of stands in a conflict to Shaddoll Fusion, because you have to obviously do Shaddoll Fusion first, since you can only use zombie monsters and none of them are zombie monsters. So you have that kind of problem, but that is usually, you can go around that quite quite good, and plus a lot of cards will be negated and stuff, so you don't have that problem too often. The card you can discard on zombie monster, which helps you to get your graveyard set up, and you summon out solitaire, which lets you get into Unizombie, which starts your play. So I really like this card, gives you kind of advantage. So I felt like this card was pretty good. Not at 3, like I don't really want to see it first turn all the time, but I think it was an additional card. You could switch it out with stuff like Monster Reborn, but I think the card is really strong by itself. Double Domain, don't really need a triple because you could search it. You don't really need to see it every time. It's a good card, or even to get into the graveyard with your special summons. But in general, if you have 2 of them in your starting hand, that can be quite annoying. At one point, I was running double Shaddoll style Soul Slash because I think the card is really good to get rid of monsters that you just can't get rid of otherwise, or to disrupt your opponent sometimes. But the deck was just getting too clogged up. If you want, you can run like a 42 card deck, put another Mizuki in, put another one of those in, and would still work basically the same way. And one trap card, like one of the counter traps, because even if you go second, it's still good to if you shut down your opponent's play sometime like during your turn, and then making sure that he can't come back from it. This card is pretty good because you can it's basically an Infernity Barrier, and you can even recover life points if it's a monster effect, which there's dangers and everything running around, and link monsters can be quite neat. For the extra deck, obviously one card for Mizuki, for the one card for the Shiranuris. Usually you don't want to send it to the graveyard, and those 2 really don't come off that much, so if you don't want them, you don't have to run them. The most important one is Winda, and it's actually kind of important that you have 2 of her, because you can recycle the Shaddoll fusion quite a lot, and being able to get your graveyard set up that much, getting extra draws and stuff is kind of important. You don't need the level 10 Shiranui that much. It's just a big beat stick, and the effect doesn't come up that much because you don't synchro summon that much. You can go for any other synchro monster that you want to, whether it's just the card that I had at the time. This card is actually, the Shogun Saga actually comes up a little bit more. It creates a massive beat stick because you can banish a monster, which can help you if you, for example, have Spirit Master in the graveyard. And same goes with Red Saga. You can pop cards. This is spell trap card removal, can be neat, but you don't have to run any of the Shiranuris, but they're just cheap and somewhat helpful most of the time. I will run one of the Dampier Vampire Sheridan, whatever this name is. You can use a monster that you steal from your opponent, for example, with like Red Baron, or through the battle effect from the vampires, make them into this guy, pop some cards, send them to the graveyard, get some monsters back to your field. Can be quite neat in my opinion. One summon sorceress, as long as she's not banned, why not play her? There's a lot of plays that you can do with her, so why wouldn't you? The Nightmare Engine, basically another spell trap card removal, being able to pitch cards from your hand, also quite neat. Vampire Sucker, good draw card, can tribute opponent's monsters, technically if you have a mirror match, or use her other effect to special summon, but always watch that you don't summon the wrong monster from the graveyard that they can actually use. And Apprentice Witchling or Landfill Linkers, whatever you want, is just like to make up for the fact that you probably could not afford 2 Vampire Suckers if you're really into budget decks. If you can, then I think you can pitch one of them because you don't really need them. And Linkuribu basically for the familiar, so you can get the card into the graveyard and start your plays basically. This is the deck profile. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know what I'm doing next. I'm on a long 1 week break, probably the next week. That's why it's 2 deck profiles and no replay videos, because I might work on the replays during that time. I hope you enjoyed the video. The deck profile should have showcased what the deck can do, and there will be some pretty spicy replays coming up to show what this deck can do. Until then, I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like, subscribe, and have a good day.